So the basic question is that the government of India, as a part of the middle path, they have they have declared education uh, under the directive principles of state policy. So Article 45 of the Indian Constitution primarily, primarily argues that the education is desirable. That is, it's the responsibility of the government of India to educate all the children. So that's how ultimately the government of India was known for following a kind of middle path in between the progressive and the feudal leaders of the then Congress party. But now the point is, what was the, let's say, education document which has prepared a comprehensive account of the education, which really inspired all the teachers, educationalists, parents, and the children and the students of all over the country. So if you look at very carefully, though we got independence in 1947, but it is the Kothari Commission, or to say Education Commission, which is popularly known as Kothari Commission of 1964, which was known for preparing a blueprint for the entire Indian society, which is known for capturing the unity and diversity of the Indian classes, gender, regions, and religions all over the country. So why the Kothari Commission is so unique, and why we need to remember or recall the importance of Kothari Commission on 4th July 2020. Look at very carefully, the Kothari Commission was the first policy document which openly declared that the future of the India is primarily shaped in four walls of the classroom. So Professor Hargopal used to quote this particular phase in different meetings. As a student here in our university also I have listened to his lectures several times. So the basic idea was that they were aiming at the common school system. One of the best, one of the outstanding feature of the Kothari Commission was advocating common school system, which was known for, which is aimed towards egalitarian India and integrated India. So friends, this is where one need to understand the role of education in cultivating the cultivating the integrated society and in achieving the egalitarian social order. Because as all of us know that even today India is a developing nation. So in 1960s it was very poor. So at that juncture, most of our policymakers, especially the Kothari Commission, was very much the Kothari Commission gave utmost importance to the critical role of education in transforming the transforming the society into a progressive society, and also transforming Indian economy as a developed economy. So they looked at education from the perspective of human capital approach. They looked at education from the perspective of the public good, education as a public good, not a private good. Because they realized that as most of the Indians who are poor, they can't afford the fee and educational expenses. So they thought that the free and compulsory education is the one and only solution. They were also very much keen that there should be only one school, like how we talk about one school of thought. Well, there's a how we all of us we talk about the progressive school of thought. Similarly, they approach school as a progressive institution. The school has the common school, that is the only the homogeneous schooling. Here I am using the homogeneous schooling from the perspective of uniform school without any compartmentalized schooling. So the point is that by 1960s itself, the commission realized the trend towards the compartmentalization of education, wherein the upper class elite, they were sending their children to the top schools. The middle class, they were sending their children to the medium fee schools, and only the agricultural class, the peasants, and the subaltern classes were sending their children to the government schools. So this is what that means. There was a kind of divide. So there was a divide in the society from the perspective of education. That's where Kotari Commission was very much keen to use education as a vehicle of social integration and bringing the egalitarian social order. So another important policy document which also changed the nature and direction, of course, despite of Kotari Commission advocacy of common school system, but in practice, we as all of us know that the government of India did not implement the common school system. Rather, directly or indirectly, it has encouraged the compartmentalized schooling system. So, another important document which also talks about the significance of education from the perspective of the public good is the National Policy on Education 1986, which primarily hints at preparing Indian education for the 21st century. So, what is the role of Indian education in shaping the future of the 21st century was the key agenda of the NPE 1986. So, one of the important policy, so they are one of the defining features of these policies are uh, some of the defining features of this policy are, let's say, improving in the infrastructure in the schools. As all of us know that one of the famous concept called Operation Blackboard was an outcome of the 1986 education policies. It continued in 1992, and wherein they were talking about improving the school recruitment, the teacher recruitment, minimum three-teacher policy in every school, and also improving the basic infrastructure from the perspective of, let's say, blackboards, chairs, stools, all. That means the basic tools, basic educational aids should be part of the schools. And also they were talking about the importance of minimal learning levels. So in a way, this 1986 educational policy, despite of giving utmost importance to the technology, they were also talking about empowering the school with the teachers, with more teachers, and with educational infrastructure. So this is where one of the defining features of this particular policy is improving education, uh, visualizing education from the perspective of quality with equity. That means, friends, the government of India in 1986 realized the importance of improving quality education, but at the same time, that should reach to the all the sections of the society, all the poorest of the poor. That was the goal of the government of India. But as all of us know, we know what was happening. So by 1990s, the government of India was moving towards the structural adjustment policies, which are known, which was nothing but, let's say, opening the doors of all the services, that is education, healthcare, and all the basic services were primarily open to the World Bank sponsorship. That's where I'm sure some of you are aware of one of the famous World Bank project called DPEP program was launched in 1990s. So some of the social science scholars, they have primarily critiqued this policy by saying that it's not a aided policy, rather is a guided policy. That is the first time the Indian education system was slowly moving towards the clutches of the imperialism, educational imperialism under the guidance of the World Bank. So, but once again, if you look at very carefully, way back to 2000, the government of India, 2000, 2004, the government of India came up with a policy called Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. So once again, they were also working towards universalization of education for all the sections of the society, especially from the perspective of infrastructure and also reaching out to the end of the order of this end of the social order. So the point is that what are all these policies were primarily one can look at all these policies as a kind of guidelines, or though the government was envisaging about the bigger commitment, but in reality they hardly bothered to improve the GDP towards education. So therefore, at this juncture in 2009, the government of India, when most of the common people they started losing the faith on the state. Let us say, if we look at very carefully, the LPG model started in 1990s. to 2000, from 1990 to 2009, almost 19 years. Let us broadly, almost in these 20 years, most of the common people have lost their, let's say, their positive faith on the government. So at this juncture, the government cleverly came up with another policy called the Right to Education. So the policy proclamation and policy declarations are so loud. They are talking about great things. And one of the greatest achievements of this particular educational policy is declaring education as a fundamental right. That's fine. So all as a student of education, all of us have to celebrate this education policy. But in reality, what are the, let's say, what is the policy and what is the practice? Yes, all of us know that the government itself has implemented, or government itself has ensured 25% of reservation to the economically weaker sections of the society, EWS, in the name of ensuring quality education in private schools. So that means the biggest flaw of the Right to Education Act, according to me, is what was the necessity for the government of India to implement 25% of reservation to 25% of reservation in private schools first, and secondly, why not the why the government was not interested to allocate the same budget towards improving the educational infrastructure, and especially improving to, and also towards recruiting the teachers in from KG to PG. So this is where, friends, one need to understand the wide gap between the policy and practice. So this is where I wish to highlight the fundamental problem with the Right to Education Act. So according to me, the Right to Education Act is not a right in a sense. Rather, it's a right towards the privatization of education. That's how I read the Right to Education Act. But if you look at the whole journey, some of you might be wondering why this man is talking about the entire history of education. Why I have primarily taken the historical perspective is to highlight the journey of the education as a fundamental right way back to 1813 as a part of the Charter Act, to 1911 as a part of Gopala Krishna Gokhale Bill, to as a part of 2010 April April 1st, when the government of India ultimately implemented the Right to Education Act all over the country. So despite of the limitations, at least one of the positive things of RTE is that the government first time recognized education as a fundamental right on par with the right to speech, right to worship, and the right to all the basic, let's say, civil liberties and all. So the question here is that how are you going to understand the public education discourse in the context of the COVID-19? So now I wish to flag some of the important points with reference to the fundamental problems with the education system, and what are the additional problems created by the COVID-19, and what is the response of the state, and what is the response of the civil society in dealing with or in approaching towards the education sector in the era of COVID-19. So this is where I wish to highlight some of the important problems. I'm sure all of you are following the news. Both the electronic media and print media has been carrying out number of articles, and some of the electronic channels are talking about, also conducting some debates on the online education. So the point is that how to understand the online education, which is also known as e-learning, and which is also known as virtual learning. There are so many nomenclatures. But what are the fundamental problems with the online education? What is the political economy of online education? And who are the people who are supporting this online education? So if you look at very carefully, some of the newspapers, especially the English newspapers like Times of India, every day they are carrying out number of articles highlighting what are the what are the positive contributions of virtual learning, and why the parents and children should be encouraged towards the virtual learning. At the same time, if you look at some of the English newspapers, such as the Hindu, it was known for taking some kind of critical stand. It is taking some kind of balanced approach towards the let's say e-learning. But when you're talking about the Telugu newspapers, most of the Telugu newspapers are not, though some of the newspapers are once in a while, there are some articles in the editorial pages on critique, highlighting what are the fundamental problems with the digital learning and all. But overall, the ideological state apparatus, if I use the concept given by Louis Althusser, one of the Italian Marxist scholars, which primarily says that the agents of state, such as especially the media and the different state agencies, they are trying to promote, or they are trying to promote, or trying to celebrate the advantages of the virtual learning. So at this junction, I wish to highlight some of the fundamental problems, some of the structural problems with the digital online education. So what are the problems? Why we need to have a critical approach towards online education? So if we look at very carefully, most of the teachers in different parts of the states in India, in general and Telangana in particular, they have been contributing towards the development of education with sheer commitment. Here, when I am talking about teachers, I am talking about government teachers first. Secondly, in the private teachers also, they are all, the entire teaching community is working with a lot of commitment. So what do you mean by commitment? So the commitment means here, teachers are not simply teaching for the salary. Unfortunately, this is the popular misconception created by some of the channels and some of the social media platforms who always try to blame the teaching community for the structural problems of the education system. The structural problems are not comes under the structural problems can't be addressed by the teachers, but unfortunately the teachers are at the receiving end. So now the question is, why I'm celebrating the role of teacher is to argue that the teachers are not working for the material benefits. Rather, most of the teachers, they work with a lot of emotional attachment. So in the sense, the teachers in the offline mode, they have a complete control over the classroom, and that they were in a position to monitor what is going on in the classroom. They know who are the best students, who are the good learners, who are the average learners, and who are the poor learners. So they were known for, let's say, evolving the different types of strategies to tackle the educational standards of the children. They were also known for putting extra effort in order to reach out to the slow learners and all. But what is happening in the online classes? I'm sure some of you are aware there are so many social media platforms are also highlighting that, including my children are also attending, let's say, 2 classes per day. Where I realized that most of the times these online classes are primarily working only to please the parents, not to ensure their education. So the point is that though the government of Karnataka, though the High Court of the Karnataka government clearly stated that there is no need to go for online classes. The government of Telangana, so the High Court of Telangana state, just even in the today's news, it also categorically highlighted the digital divide in the context of India. But unfortunately, there was a trend towards, let's say, embracing the online education, or the online education at one level is on imposed on the imposed on the parents as well as the children. So apart from the technical issues, I'm not that much bothered about the technical issues, such as, let's say, access to internet and access to smartphones, and ability of the parents to guide the child in in opening the Zoom or Google Meet in order to attend the classroom, and the ability of the child to follow the instructions of the teachers. So there are several structural problems which are associated with the online teaching and online listening. So why I am taking this particular issue is to look at the whole idea of teaching within the framework of a culture of learning. So when you're talking about the culture of learning in the context of India, so Indian culture of learning is a combination of a traditional and modern. So modern from the perspective of technological teaching aids, and traditional from the perspective of emotional bonding and invoking the positive ethos of Indian society in enriching the cognitive capabilities of the children. So, but unfortunately, what is happening is that the hyper globalists, they are trying to celebrate this whole model of the whole model of the online learning model, which in a long wherein they are hardly bothered about the what are the advantages and disadvantages, what are the disadvantages of this model. So the second point I wish to highlight is that whether this online education is it an alternative, is it a supplementary, or in what way this is going to be useful to the parents and teachers, parents and students. So if you look at very carefully, the online teaching and learning is primarily only is a kind of at one level I can say that is only one form of entertaining a child for certain time. At least it gives an opportunity to the child, and that also it gives an opportunity to the parent that at least something is going on, some education, some, let's say, learning, something towards learning is going on. Except that this whole idea of learning is not at all possible in the online model of education. So as the today's newspaper has primarily reproduced the survey of UTF Teachers Association, which primarily highlights some of the important findings, which I would like to share here. According to this, more than hardly 2% of children are happy with the online classes. 15% of children said, okay, it is okay. Whereas 83% of the parents and children, they said that it's not at all useful to understand anything. So the basic idea here is that, as also the data clearly says, more than 50% of the parents doesn't have either smartphone or access to internet or adequate data in order to support this whole thing. So now, what is the solution? What are the alternative methods, and how to go with, or how to cope up with the COVID-19? So my basic understanding about the COVID-19 is that the one and only way to deal with the COVID-19 is going for the shift system in the schools and colleges, because we should not think that the online model of education is only a kind of a supplementary, is only a supplementary educational aid is not at all a learning. So therefore, I wish to argue that in order to ensure a proper learning mechanisms, one should go for the shift system in education shift system in classroom teaching. And another important point which is going to be useful in order to tackle the challenges of 21st century is like how government of India has started a famous education program called Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. Similarly, the government of India should come up with another flagship program called Sarva Vaignanik Abhiyan. Then only, most according to which, let every family should be provided with internet. Because now we are living in a technological era. Now, most of the government programs are also talking about Aadhaar card. They are asking you to go for online registration. So, for even to apply for any certificate, including in different villages in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. So, given this kind of condition, my argument is that the Sarve Vagyanik Abhiyan is going to be a long-term solution, wherein wherein this technological advancement would is going to enhance the educational opportunities for the children who are deprived of the digital divide. So my submission here is that we're talking about education in the context of COVID-19. So the government should talk to the teachers union and the different educationalists from colleges and universities, and they should come up with a alternative comprehensive policy which are going to fulfill the local needs of the people. We are not supposed to advocate for a universal program which is not going to be practical in the context of India. So I wish to stop here.